Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, my friends. How are you?
Very well. Good to have you. I typed in the wrong area code when I sent the number to James. So, hey, but all's well that ends well. It gave me more time to hype up the interview. And listen, you're so accomplished in a lot of different areas, but we want to focus on this changing the narrative. You can read all about it on Twitter. Just use the hashtag changing the narrative. And, I had somebody message me this morning when they saw that you're going to be on, and they said, yeah, you're going to have that lady on to talk about domestic violence. And that's probably a little simplistic, I think, and certainly that's probably something that you cover, but this is not just about domestic violence. This is about young men empowering themselves, realizing their value outside of football, and I know you use the king and queen analogy. You want them to feel like kings, and you want to treat them to treat the women in their lives like queens. So just start right there. Yes, probably domestic violence is covered, but it's about a lot more than that, isn't it?
Thank you for getting it. Thank you so much for getting it, because in the time that I've gone from FSU to Clemson to Ole Miss to FIU to Minnesota to Baylor to Alabama, which has been my path over the past year, and I've got about 10 more coming up in the next 6-8 months, I have had to fight that stigma. And somebody will say to my marketing agent, "Oh, well, we've already had a domestic violence speaker in this month or this season." I'm not a domestic violence speaker, as Paul Feinbaum said, and he's a dear friend of mine. He said, Rachel, you're an activist. You're an activist for what is right. And, and I like to tell people I'm a speaker of passion and platform and purpose, and helping these young men find out what in the world that they were created for. And by the way, it's not football and it's not them. And once they do that, they have just a renewed sense, a new kind of lease on life. I've had 4 young men tell me, whisper in my ear, Gary, over these stops, say to me, you're the first person that has told me I have a purpose outside of football. I mean, literally, these young men and countless others have been told that they're only good for their football prowess and their talent. And then when that goes away, we wonder why these guys don't have anything, or why they're lost psychologically, because that's what they've been told by family members, by people around them, by coaches, by different people. And so thank you for being one of the media members that gets it, and thank you for being a media member that cares enough to cover this, because I've had others poo-poo me and say, just diminish what's happening here. And I like to say to them, come with me to one of these talks. I invite you to be a fly on the wall and sit in the corner, especially when we're done. And I give them these bracelets, and they say changing the narrative on it. And I am passionate and emphatic. And I tell them, don't you dare take that bracelet if you're going to walk out of here the same man that you walked in. If you're going to be a king in every area of your life, with your word, with your time, with your character, the way you treat people, with your effort, the way you view women, the way you talk to women, the way you let others treat women around you, if you're going to be the same, then don't take that bracelet. But if you're committed to being a king, and changing the narrative of college football, then you take that bracelet. And Gary, they come up to me. I open it up, say, if it touched you, come speak to me on the way out. And, at Alabama, 30 players lined up before they had to go to positional meetings.
Wow.
At Baylor, 40 players lined up to hug me and tell me their stories, whisper in my ear where no one else could hear their unique stories about wanting to be a king for their mom that's dying of cancer, or wanting to be a king for their son. Or Rachel, if I was in that house that night, I would have protected you. Or Rachel, I always thought I treated women well, but you've challenged me to a whole new level. So I always invite people that are, like I said, that want to diminish this movement, and that's exactly what it is. I tell them, listen, come and sit and watch with your own 2 eyes, and you will be amazed.
Sirius XM College Sports Nation host Rachel Baribeau, our guest here on the Bud Light Hotline. You can read her at Gridiron Now. You can also see her on television, and right now she's going around the country speaking to college football programs about changing the narrative. You mentioned Baylor, and I want to speak specifically about that program because we know what's happened there. Of course, Matt Rule has come in as the head coach, and I haven't talked to anyone or read anything about him that's negative. He seems to be a high-character individual. There's already been a change in the administration and in the football program and with the coaching staff, but yet there is that stigma attached. I'm just curious, Rachel, what was that like to go there and speak to that program? You said the reaction was positive. What was that experience like?
Oh, my gosh, Gary, overwhelming. Heavy, beautiful, overwhelming. the players, when I walked in the room, I think they did have a little bit of, they had been beat down. They had been vilified in the media. They've been called rapists and every cuss word that you can think in the book. Their families have been bullied simply because their child goes to Baylor. The tennis team has been verbally accosted in the airport. I mean, it's just been terrible. Not just the football team, but once I started talking and they recognized that I came for them, I came to fight for them, I came to advocate for them, I came to make them, to bring out the man that God created them to be. There was like the laying down of the arms, right? Like their hearts opened up and you could see them let the walls down. Right. And afterwards, I cried with many of them, and it's been truly amazing. And that's what I want people to know. Like, if anything, I want them to know there is no one in administration, no one in the coaching staff, and no one of those players that had anything to do with the scandal. And, I've had a media member the other day tell me there's nothing Baylor can do. They need to keep their head down. The players are just going to have to take the brunt. They need to keep their head down and let time pass. I call bull crap on that, Gary. There is something they can do. They can be the men that God created them to be. They can set the world on fire with their good deeds and thereby change the narrative of Baylor to where it starts trending for positive. And we can keep telling the stories of these young men that had nothing to do with it. I refuse to give up on them. I refuse to say the only thing that they can do is just keep their heads down and keep moving. That's not, I don't subscribe to that. If that's a theory I subscribe my life to, nothing would ever get done in the world. But I want people to know that there are some amazing men that are coaching there and amazing men that are players. And not only that, the administration that is committed, they're bringing me back in August. They're bringing me back in to speak to the entire athletic community. And they want to bring me in yearly. They're committed to this. It's not just me. They had an etiquette dinner on Friday night, which I loved. Matt Rule was teaching them how to go out and be confident when you go out and have dinner and not be, embarrassed of your skills. So I'm just an extension of Matt Rule, and you're right. He is salt of the earth.
When you prepare for an interview like this with you and you start reading about changing the narrative and your message, and then you say to yourself, why is it taking so long for someone to get this out? Because really, I mean, it's true. I mean, a lot of these young men, from the time they're 7 or 8, 9 years old, they play football, and their whole self-worth, everything about them is tied into playing football. I mean, I don't know how many times working here in Tuscaloosa, I'll be out and somebody will say, well, there's an Alabama football player, or they'll bring someone up and say, this is so-and-so, he plays football at Alabama. You probably, everything that is about them is about football. And while that's great on one hand, you're right. In the real world, I could see where that could be a quick problem. And just these young men finding their own true identities as to who they are as people first and football players second.
And I don't know why it's taken so long either. But all I will say is I think there's been some great, men and women that have been, going around speaking, probably giving the same, maybe, central message that I give, right? But I don't know if anybody's mobilized. And I don't, and I do feel like I was created for this. Am I going to quit being a sportscaster? No, but this is my legacy. I will do this until I can no longer do this. And the next coolest thing that is happening is I'm going to be training and teaching former athletes how to give the changing the narrative talk that's combined with their own story so that they can go into their high schools, they can go into their colleges, they can go into their, after school centers and be able to give this talk because, Gary, I'm only one person, but I want to teach other people how to fish as well and how to spread out and mobilize and give this message to more and more people, especially young men, young athletes. If we can stave off some of this entitlement that we see with these young men at 13, 14, 15, 16, my goal at the end of the day is to help them figure out what it is that they were created for and to be the best man that they can be. But also, if I get to prevent them making the decision that's going to end their college football career, and if I can prevent another victim, then that's part of the story too.
Rachel Baribeau, our guest on the Bud Light Hotline. She's changing the narrative. You can follow her on Twitter at Rachel Baribeau. That's at Rachel, Baribeau. Also at rachelbaribeau.com if you want more information. All right, we covered Baylor, and a great experience, as you said, but you knew you were going to have a captive audience there. You knew those young men and that coaching staff was going to be tied into what you had to say because of what that program's been through. I'm interested, though, when you come to a program from Baylor to one like Alabama, not that there aren't issues at Alabama, I'm not saying that, but you're talking about a program that's the top of college football. These young men are riding high. This town, you've worked here in Tuscaloosa. You know how football players are viewed, and they can do no wrong. Your reception there, how tied in and attentive were they? I know you said you had a good response afterward, or did you see some pushback from the sense of, shucks, I don't need to hear this? What was it like to come to a program like Alabama that's on the top of the college football world with your message?
Well, there was only one young man that, bless his heart, he must have been really tired. He was fighting sleep, and he was trying his hardest to stay awake. But other than that, I had a very captive audience. Listen, I take into account everywhere I've gone, where I go, and the message changes just a little bit. The core message stays the same. And how it works is, and people ask this a lot, is do they pay attention? Or are they, somebody asked me one time on a radio show, are they eating Skittles and on their phone? And I'm like, come on. The way it's set up is I start and I tell them a little about who I am, and then I play this video from when I went to training camp with a professional indoor football team and lasted for 5 days of two-a-days. And got my rear end beat, and they tackled me and wore pads and all of that. And it's 3 hours of football in the morning and 3 hours at night. And the video, Gary, is super embarrassing. It's hilarious and embarrassing. So we laugh together. And then once we laugh together, we're bonded. They respect me. They're like, okay, this girl knows what she's talking about. And we go on to talk about, my life and how I thought it was about me. And I thought that, I wanted to be a famous sportscaster. And and I talk about my time with Kevin Turner, who passed away from ALS, and what he taught me in the climb up Kilimanjaro. And from there, they're with me. And then we kind of make the turn into what does it mean to be a good man, chivalry. And we talk about the night that somebody drugged me across the house by my hair. And by that time, they're on their elbows or on their knees. They're leaning forward. Eyes are big. And they're nodding. I asked them, would you help me? Would you have helped me if you were in that house? And at Alabama, one guy, the guys are nodding, and one guy from at the top left screams, yes, hell yes, I would have helped you. So by that time, we're bonded. And there's a respect level. We're bonded. And they absolutely got it. And the message that was different in Alabama was this: you are the standard bearer. Everybody is looking to you. And so you can help me. Together we can change the narrative. Let's change the stereotype of football players. Let's start trending for positive. Let's start setting the world on fire with our good deeds. Because, Gary, I get stopped in airports, and I'm sure you get this too, from, Joe Redneck fan wherever in the country, because you can be a redneck wherever you're from. And he says, college football players ain't nothing but a bunch of, and then fill in the blank.
Oh, Lord.
And that makes me mad. And I told the Alabama players that. I said, I said, I'm a spicy Latina. That makes me want to just sock them right in the face. And I said, but I'm not. And I said, you can help me. Help me help you change the narrative. Together we can change the narrative for the Travis Rudolphs of the world that went and sat with Bo Paschke, the little autistic boy, at the lunch table. That was 2 weeks after I gave Changing the Narrative talk to them. By the way, I'm not claiming that, but I am saying the coach told me that at FSU that, your talk did have an effect on him. And so you can feel pride in him going and doing that. So, we talk about those things. So that's how the message changed at Alabama. It was, I told them point blank, you are the standard bearer. Everyone is looking to you. If you do it, if you lead the charge, others will follow.
Wrapping up with Rachel Baribeau, who's going across the country speaking to college football players and coaches about changing the narrative, changing how they view themselves as not just football players, but as people. And that's kind of where I want to close on this, is it seems to me at the core your message is, remember your humanity. You're trying to be bigger, faster, stronger, and football is a team game, and you put a lot into it. But outside of that uniform, you're a person like everyone else. And it just seems like really the message is, remember that. Be nice. The golden rule, treat people as you would have them treat you. Do for others, because you can get a satisfaction out of that you can't match anywhere else in your individual life. Am I getting that? Is that basically what you're saying at the end of the day? Just be a good person. Realize your value as a human being.
Yeah, take the headlines back for good. Set the world on fire with your good deeds. Involved in that and stuffed inside of that is how do we view women? We talk about popular culture, and women. Popular culture will tell you that women aren't nothing but a piece of you know what, and you can do this and you can leave and you can never talk to them. And we talk about the fact if you want a queen, if you want a woman that's going to change your life, that's going to make you be a better person, you got to be a king. You can't be, doing this, doing that, lying here, going here, messing around with this girl, doing this. So, yeah, so we even talk about what does popular culture say, how do we view women, and we talk about what it means to be a good man. I have them interactively tell me what chivalry means. How it's not fair for me to say, Gary, be a good man, if these young men are coming from a situation in which they've never seen a good man until their college
Great
life.
point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we talk about how to be a good man, and how to be a good man means humanity. It means kindness, as you mentioned.
When you use a term like chivalry, I'm curious, are there some that don't even understand what it means?
Yes, funny enough, you said that. Scotty Montgomery, I'm going to ECU in July. He said, well, Rachel, you're going to have to even explain what the term chivalry means. They don't. A lot of my guys don't know that, and so I recognize that. I remember one of the schools I went to, I talked about being a good man, and really, faith is the thing that drives me. And I remember God kind of pressing on my heart and saying, it's not enough for you to say to be a good man. You got to show them. Like, some of these guys have never seen a good, positive man in their life. And I am not at all, Gary, excusing any type of behavior. But what I'm saying is, I'm one of those people that wants to dig deeper and say, why did you go to the fist? Why was that the first thing that you went to? Did you see that growing up? Did you see your dad beat up your mom? Did you see your grandpa beat up your grandma? Did you never see a man around? Did you see mom's boyfriend hit her? Why? And so, again, not excusing it at all, but I'm one of those people that I want to save young men, and maybe that means they have to go to another school or get kicked off the team, but they need help down the road, and I don't want to throw them away like garbage, because all we do is the cycle just keeps continuing if you do that. I want to get to the bottom of the onion, the layer. I had a player from Baylor, I'll share this very quickly, say to me the other day, he said, I saw you in the hallway, and he said, I thought you were really pretty, ma'am. And he said, then you started to speak, and you were like an onion, and you peeled back all these layers, and I realized how smart you were, how strong you were. And he went on, and he said, and I have this respect level for you that is so much greater than thinking you're pretty. And I was like, wow.
What a compliment.
So if we're doing that, if we're getting them to think more, right, to look at women differently, and I just don't want to give up on them. There's a human being. Each one of these men are beautiful human beings that God created, and I want them to be all they can be, Gary.
Well, you're doing it, and it's an incredible message, and you're taking it around the country to these young men. I've already mentioned a number of platforms that you're available and people can find you, but go ahead before we close, and if people want more information, if they want to know more, maybe if they want to be a person that gets involved in learning how to counsel themselves, as you alluded to, you're going to find people that can help spread the message. Just tell folks how they can get involved.
Absolutely. They can go to rachelbaribeau.com. That's rachelbaribeau.com. You can just hit the Contact Me app right there, the tab, and the email will come straight to my inbox. And I've gotten a lot of emails from parents thanking me, and that's been really beautiful. Parents of Baylor players, parents of Alabama players, a parent that has a kid at both schools. So I've gotten a lot of that. So they can do that. They can follow me on Twitter at Rachel Baribeau. And certainly I would love for anybody who wants to get involved in this movement. They can do that. And very soon we'll have changingthenarrative.com website, and we'll have, dates and speaking clips and ways that we can work it out, that maybe I can come and speak to your school or your company.
Movement's the right word. I'm glad you used that word. That's exactly what it is. Hey, thanks so much, Rachel. Sorry I missed you last week when you were in Tuscaloosa. I was out of town, but so happy we could catch up today and continue to spread this great message.
Hey, Gary, thank you so much for being a media member that gets it. They got a big heart and a bigger vision, and it's not is not the person that says it's past us. It's Pandora's box. It can't be changed, because we can change the culture.
Well, I enjoyed the